damn you guys. That's all I can say is just damn you guys. Ugh, so mad at you all right now. I guess some of you got a sneak peek at this project that we're going to do today. And that is unfair, dirty, low. Of course, it's my own stupid fault for leaving it in the camera shot. What are you going to do? Don't go away. I'll show you what it is in just a second. Hey everybody, it is Paul from Fat Guy Productions coming to you as always from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. Myself and Harry Nuts are happy to be here with you today to bring you a real blast from the past. Now, like I said, some of you got a sneak peek and mentioned it in comments on, I think, one of my die-cast restoration builds. And so you kind of saw it, but you haven't seen it. And so today I'm going to do the build and show you the whole thing of, like I said, a blast from the past. The Boot Hill Express. Man, what a favorite kit of mine. I'll tell you what, I remember this kit like it was yesterday. It was such a fun kit. You know, it's got the skeleton and the drag wheels and the big engine, and just what a fun kit that you could never ever build well. Okay, I mean, this thing never came out right. I don't care who you were back in the day, you could not build this kit. And having just done it now, I'm beginning to remember why that is. This is not an easy build. I don't care what they say. What grade do they give this? They give this a moderate skill rating, a number 2. That is a hoot and a holler, because this is absolutely a 3 most challenging. All right, either way, we're going to build this sucker, so let's get right to it. Wow, talk about a blast from the past. The Boot Hill Express, a Monogram classic. I remember building this as a young kid. It never came out right, but man, what a fun build, and it sure brings back a lot of great memories. So let's go ahead and dive right into this model. As always, I'll give the instructions a thorough review, especially because I remember this model being kind of difficult. So I'm going to look at these very carefully. And also, I like to plan out how I'm going to attack it, because I like to pre-build and then paint. And so I have to kind of have some idea of how I'm going to go. I guess it's only natural that Tom Daniels got the credit for this car, as he was Monogram's major player when it came to crazy wild rides. But this is actually a car designed by Ray Farner, and back in the 60s, and you know, when wild and crazy rides were happening. Anyhow, so we're going through the pieces now and making sure everything's the way it should be. I noticed some scuffs in the glass I'm going to have to deal with. We've got one bag of sprues here. You know, this is a typical early Monogram kit. There's not a lot to it. But this kit, I remember, and I will find out very shortly, I will remember how difficult it was. Chrome, all of it's got to go, okay? I'm not a big fan of model kit chrome. I think it looks out of scale, if that makes any sense. So I'll be stripping all that chrome away with a little super clean, some rubber tires, and look at this, even a nice little collector's card. Pretty cool feature. Okay, I'm going to start things by dropping all that chrome into my vat of super clean, and sometime tomorrow I'll take it out and all that chrome will be gone. And now I can go ahead and start assembly. As always, you begin the process by removing the parts from the sprues using some side cutters. Now I know it's very tempting on some pieces where it looks harmless to just kind of bend them off, but you can really actually damage the piece, and then it's just one more thing you have to fix later. So just do it smart and do it the right way the first time. Use some side cutters, and if you don't have a pair of those, use a sharp X-Acto knife and cut them off cleanly. Alright, so I'll remove all the pieces that I'm going to need, and we're going to be starting on the motor here. And everything gets a complete test fit. Everything gets a pass with the X-Acto knife to remove any flash, any residual from the sprue, any ejector pin marks, or any other things. Now during the fitting, I'm just making sure that everything is lined up and everything is going to fit smoothly and comfortably. If it does, I'm going to break out my Tamiya extra thin cement, and it's a very simple process after lining everything up to just touch the cement to the seams, and capillary action will draw it through the seam and glue your part together. Now by applying a little bit of pressure as I'm gluing, the cement is melting the plastic on either side of the seam, and I'm kind of pressing it together. And that's helping it all kind of meld into one thing so that when it dries, it'll dry almost like one part. And the side benefit is that that plastic will help fill the gap and reduce the amount of filling and sanding I'll have to do later. But we'll continue through and build as much of each sub-assembly as I can so I can get to painting. In this case, I've looked at the instructions very carefully and determined I can do most of the body work in advance here. That's going to be a real boon for me, as I'm going to be able to do any filling of seams and gaps and whatnot, and not really have to worry about it later on down the road. My go-to glue is Tamiya extra thin cement, but in this build, for example, I'm going to use at least 2 other glues. I'm going to use a Tamiya extra thin quick drying cement, and I'm also going to use some CA or cyanoacrylate crazy glue. And when I get to those stages, I'll let you know that I'm using those glues and why. So the first thing out of the box is this kit is not the best molded. These big long side panels here have some pretty serious bows in them, and it's something that's going to come up later that I'm going to have to deal with. But it also has some pretty good gaps where the front and back pieces join, so I'm going to have to do a little filling there, no getting around it. So I'm going to turn to my plastic putty and put a little bead in there, wipe it smooth and let it dry, and then we can go ahead and sand it down. If you haven't tried this plastic putty, I highly recommend it. I'll put a link for it down below, but it applies very nicely. It goes on smooth. You can work it with a paintbrush and some water to get it nice and smooth and into detailed areas and not obliterate everything that's around the putty. So it really is a great little product. It dries hard. It sands good. I'm a real fan of it. It's my #1 filler for model building. Okay, so the chrome pieces have been in the super clean long enough, and here you can see already, there's all the chrome gone. And the nice thing about this is there's other ways to do it, but the super clean has a kind of a nice scented smell to it. It's not harsh. I use gloves here because I don't like the feel of it on my hands. I know that sounds like a little OCD weirdness on my part, but that's why I'm wearing the gloves. Otherwise, it really doesn't bother your skin at all. It doesn't smell bad. It's not caustic and abrasive, and it does a fantastic job and will even take off paint. So I've told you that I'm not a fan of chrome kit. And in this kit, I probably could have used it because there's not really any places where I'm going to have to glue chrome pieces together. But I just don't think it feels to scale. So after stripping it off, I'll eventually be replating this using AK Interactive's Xtreme metals. I'll be using their gold and their chrome paints. Okay, so with the filler on the body pretty dry, I can go ahead and break out a little sanding sponge and get to work on unifying that, lowering high spots, smoothing out the filler, and just making sure that the body is going to be ready for a nice paint job. So you can buy these sanding sponges. They're made by Tamiya, and they come in like a sheet. I cut them down to these little more manageable cubes, and they came in a little packet of different grits, and I cut them down into these little cubes, and they're just really super handy for sanding on these models. They're not too aggressive. They're flexible. I really like them, and I will be sure to put a link to these down below for you so you can go ahead and get yourself some. I think you'll like them. Okay, so this is an old model kit, and it's certainly not going to have a bunch of resin upgrade parts, and it's not going to have, photo etch and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean we can't improve upon it. So here I'm going to take and put drill some little holes in the velocity stacks in the ends using a micro drill bit and my rotary tool, just so that they actually look like real pipes instead of just a stick. So just be real careful. Get this drill bit up to speed before you touch it to the piece. Otherwise, it's going to jump around and wander on you, and slow and steady wins the race here. Okay, so the engine block and transmission, which were all molded together, is dry and ready for paint. This is a Hemi, so I'm going to paint it orange. It's not a Hemi orange. It's just going to be what is that? That's a Tamiya X6 orange. So we're going to paint that Tamiya X6 orange, and then we're going to paint the transmission a nice aluminum color. And the trick to brush painting, it is, believe it or not, possible to brush paint and not get a bunch of brush marks and yucky spots. The trick is here to thin your paint down so it will flow smoothly, it will take longer to dry, and brush spots will disappear as it sets and dries. So this is an acrylic, so I've just mixed a little bit of water in it. I've got it pretty thin, and I'm just brushing it on and letting it do its thing. And it's going to come out really nice. It'll be a little too thin for my liking at first, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a second coat after this. But that's the trick to brush painting, is make sure that your paint is thin enough. Okay, so as long as we're on a painting kick, I can put that aside to dry, and now we can go ahead and start putting down some of the chrome, because I'm going to want to give that plenty of time to dry. Now here's this tank needed to be assembled before painting, so I did that, making sure to pay attention to anything that needed to be put together first. So this got assembled first and is getting painted, and just like with Alclad or some of these other products, I put down a nice glossy black base finish. And now I'm just very, very lightly misting the Xtreme Metal Chrome over the parts. And you'd be surprised what a great look you can get doing it this way. It is an art form, and it's an art form I will self-admit that I don't have down pat yet. So sometimes I get amazing results, sometimes I get satisfactory results. I wish I could be more consistent with it, and practice will make perfect. What I need to do is I need to go pick out a couple really junky kits I don't care about, and I just need to chrome everything in there and just keep working on my technique. But anyhow, at the end of the day, I'm going to get a chrome finish that is going to look a little bit more in scale with this kit, and I think it'll just have a better feel. Okay, so with most of the chrome stuff done, not all, but most of it, I can go ahead and put that aside to dry. And now I can turn my attention to the body. Now, it too got a nice prep base of some Tamiya Fine Primer, and then a nice base of glossy black base coat. And now I'm just going to lay on very gently the Xtreme Metals gold finish, and it should come out really, really nice and work well with this model. So again, when you're working with these metallizers like Alclad and Xtreme Metals and stuff, it's important to lay it down very, very lightly as you go. If you go too fast, too heavy, you're going to lose all the metallic look. Now some are asking, well, why didn't you just go with Alclad? Because I really do like Alclad, but Alclad is not a very tough finish. And because I'm putting the paints on so early in the process and building up over them, I needed something a little bit tougher. And the Xtreme Metals can take tape and some handling, and so I felt like it was a better choice for this model at this time. If I was going to do a chrome piece that was just going to be like decorative on the end at the outside, I might have considered Alclad or maybe even my Molotov. But you can't really mix and match because then you get these different feels. So I try to avoid that whenever possible. Anyhow, all that chrome painting is done. Everything is dry. Now I can start really getting some assembly done. Here you can see the motor in the orange with the aluminum transmission, and now I'm gluing on the chrome valve covers. Again, I'm just kind of putting them in place and tapping my glue to the seams and letting capillary action do all the work here. Okay, so this is going to be a fairly straightforward build. I'm not going to do a lot of weathering and all that, and there aren't really any add-on kits, that I can use. But it doesn't mean I don't want to put some life to this thing. So we are going to do some plug wires, and I have this spool of wire. It's just a twisted black and red wire, and the red wire is just about the perfect gauge to be my spark plug wires. So I'm going to unravel some of this wire, and then I'm going to cut myself out 8 pieces, and I'm going to use that for the spark plug wires. I cut and fit a small piece of brass tubing over the top of the distributor, and I've got it all clamped together down here, and I'm just putting a drop of gel super glue down into the little brass tube, and that's where all the spark plug wires will go. So you can see them over there in my left hand. I've got them all bundled together, and once I get the little super glue in here, I'm going to just take them and I'm going to kind of set them down inside that little brass tube into the super glue and just set them aside to dry before starting to manipulate them. Now, word of warning, I use like a medium glue. Use the thickest stuff you have because this stuff wicked up the wires a little bit and kind of glued them together a little bit higher than I would like. I would have liked to have been able to get a bend in them right at the very point where they come out, but I wasn't able to do that because they kind of glued themselves together. So just use the thickest glue you have so that you don't have a problem with them wicking together. All right, so they're stuck in there. I can go ahead and set that aside to dry, and then we'll worry about putting it in a little bit later. Everybody sees things differently, and a lot of people would have painted the interior base brown because it's kind of got a wood grain to it. I went with a black. I was envisioning more of like, pianos, how they had a black finish to them, and even though they were made out of wood, I don't know, it just felt more correct to me. So I went with black. And now I'm also doing my own thing here on the curtains. In that, yeah, I've got gold trim hanging down, and I'm going to keep that. But the curtain part above it, instead of a tan like the instructions are suggesting, I'm going with kind of a deep red, like almost a maroon, and I'll paint that in, and then I'll leave the gold tassels. Okay, so for this paint, I'm actually using Vallejo paint, and it's also an acrylic. And again, whenever brush painting, make sure your paint is thin enough. If it's too thick, it's just going to give you all sorts of hassles, okay? So make sure your paint is thin enough, and basically use the molded lines and let them help guide you. You'll notice I am wearing a lighted visor because I'm an old fart and I can't see. So do what you gotta do, okay? Magnify it, take your time, set it down, brace it, whatever it takes, but just take your time and kind of flow the paint up into the seams and get it where it needs to be, and it'll look great when you're done. Yeah, see, I think that the red looks so much better against the gold paint of the body. If I'd painted this kind of a tan or a brown, it wouldn't have popped like this red is doing against the gold. So I really like that. But now I have an issue in that the gold frills look the exact same as the body, and I can't be having that because they're cloth dangly things as opposed to the gold leafed finish on the hearse itself. So basically, I've taken some of my leftover black Vallejo paint and I've wet it down so thin that it's almost like a wash. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just applying it to the gold part, kind of like a wash, and then I'll buff away the majority of it with a Q-tip, and then I'll give it a nice kind of a different feel and separate it from the gold of the body and make sure that it doesn't look the same. Okay, so the distributor wires were dried in there. I've kind of splayed them out to make it easier to work on, and I've glued the distributor to the engine, but I'm going to leave that sit for a bit while I go ahead and put on these exhaust pipes. And again, just a little Tamiya extra thin, fit the part into place, and tap it to its connections and let capillary action do its job. Stupid me, I forgot to drill out the tips of the exhaust pipes, so I ended up having to do that. It was actually the absolute very last thing I did on this model, which made it very difficult, but it really had to be done to give this kit the look that I was going for. So actually, it's a magneto, it's not a distributor, but anyhow, it's the same concept anyhow. So it's dry on the engine, the exhaust pipes are dry, and I have taken my micro drill bits and drilled little holes in the valve covers where the spark plug wires would go. And now I'm just taking each wire one at a time, feeding it down in through the holes, and it's looking pretty amazing if you ask me. Yeah, I'm sorry about all the chimes and dings and dongs and everything you hear when I'm doing my videos, but if you've watched a lot of my videos, you know I'm very home automated, and so anytime a door opens or anything like that, or there's motion in the dog run, I get an alert, and I try and edit those out as best as I can, but sometimes I just can't get around them. So forgive the hell out of me. Okay, so for the wheels, they give you these plastic inserts that so you can make the wheels like a white wall or whatever you want to do. And at this point, I was wishing they hadn't done it, but in the end, I'm going to really like it, so it doesn't really matter. Anyhow, I've treed up a bunch of other parts that need painting. Everything is going to get a different kind of paint job. The roof is going to get a really high gloss finish, and then we got some stuff that needs gold and a little bit of everything. So after getting everything mounted, I can take it back over to the spray booth, and again we can go ahead and start laying down some more paint. Okay, so here's where things are starting to really get fun, and I'm really starting to get excited about the way this thing is going. I've got the little fuel tank installed inside there, and it looks amazing in its little chrome finish. And now I'm putting in the little railing, and it just looks amazing in there against that black and with the gold on the outside. So I basically kind of fit it into place, and from beneath it, I'm just tapping the holes and letting the glue fill up the holes and kind of glue it into place. But I really am starting to feel this kit. I've had some headaches, no doubt. Some of the pieces are not the best molded, and there were some issues here, but it's really starting to take shape, and I'm really starting to get excited about it now. So here I'm being taken back to my youth and remembering just what a pain in the ass this kit was. The rear suspension on this was super fiddly and really kind of delicate, and I don't really understand the whole setup, but it was a pain to do as an adult now. I can't even imagine what it must have been like as a kid working with a tube of Elmer's, and oh my god, it just must have been an absolute headache. But I did get past it, it got put together, and everything was good. Alright, so now it's time to turn my attention to the drag slicks, which look like model drag slicks. So we need to fix that, and a little bit of aggressive sandpaper all the way around the surface of it should take care of that issue for us. Okay, so we've got half of the wheels inside the tires, and we're attaching them to the rear axle, and then we can figure out how to put that whole front together with the white sidewall insert and and the mags. And I have to say that the mags came out really cool. They look really super. And so here you can see there was a quick glimpse. I know you probably wanted to see it better, but you will. But the wheels, the rear wheels came out really amazing. I was super happy with them. And here I am trying to glue this monstrosity together. And here, so you've got these crazy springs, you got this rickety axle, and you're trying to get all that glued together, and you have to get the engine in there and mate the drive line with the rear of the transmission. And let me tell you something. I don't know how any kid ever in the history of children ever built this model kit, because it's not an easy kit to build. So just be warned. Okay, so as much as I would love to wait for the rear axle to dry before trying to shove this engine in here, I can't, because I have to make sure that the transmission and driveline line up. So it's still wet, so I've got to fight with that, and it barely just squeezes through here. Okay, this was a challenge, and you just got to kind of squeeze it in there, get it in there. So once you get it in there, you can connect it to the drive line, set it into its cradle. That part actually worked out pretty well. And then once it's all in place, it'll kind of hold itself so that I can go ahead and drop some liquid cement in there and get it all glued together. Now, you remember in the unboxing, I said there was some scuffs in the window. And as prominent as these are, you cannot let that go. So I'm going to break out my Flitz, which is mainly a silver polish, but works great on plastics and other stuff. And I'm going to dab some on there, and I'm going to polish the heck out of this and get rid of those scuff marks before applying a finish to the glass. So with the Flitz on the glass, I've just got my finger wrapped up in a little bit of shop towel, and I'm going to start buffing away like a crazy person. And when you hear the squeaky sound, that's when you're really starting to get some real polishing action. And I was fortunate that these scuffs weren't that bad, and they polished right out pretty easily. It wasn't a big deal. And so once I was done with that, cleaned everything up, and now it was time to treat them. Now, you've seen me a million times using my gauzy for glass, but the jar is too small, so I busted out my Pledge. It's great for glass, almost as good as gauzy. I use it for protecting finishes on models. I use it for a lot of different stuff. And here I just thought the easiest way would be to just pour it all over the glass. So that's all I'm doing. I've got a paper plate underneath it to catch the excess, and I'm just kind of squirting the Pledge all over the glass, both sides, inside and out, and then I'll shake off the excess and set it aside to dry. You know you're in the home stretch when you start nipping off all the little fiddly bits, and that's where we're at here. Now I'm starting to get things off, like the little dashboard, the steering wheel, the steering column, the shifter, things like that. So, you know, we're getting close, and so that's a good thing, but it's also the tougher stuff for people like me with big, giant salami fingers. The dashboard's going to need the most work. It's been painted silver, but we've got all these gauges on here, and so it's going to need the most work, the most drawing time, because it's going to need black, silver, and the clear. So it's got a lot of stuff that has to happen here. So I begin by shaking up a little bit of Tamiya flat black, and again, you see I've got my little jar of water. I'm going to make sure it's nice and thin, and basically I will fill each gauge with the black paint. Being careful, again, wearing my visor, my lighted visor. If you don't have one of these, you need one of these. It makes this kind of work a lot easier. And basically just kind of flooding the paint in up to the rims of the gauges. Okay, and so with the black gauges all painted in and nice and dry, I can break out some Tamiya X11 chrome silver. And now what I'm doing is there is some modeling marks in the gauges of the gauge hands and what would be like numbers or something. It's all so small that it's unreadable, but you can see that there's a raised element there. And so that's all I'm doing is I'm very, very lightly going over the needle, and I'm very lightly just putting little silver marks on top of the erased elements, which would be numbers or what have you inside all the gauges. And so I'll go through and do that to each one of those. Okay, so gauges have been painted black. All the silver work has been done. It's nice and dry. And so this is a little bit of Testors clear window glass glue. This stuff is great for making gauge faces. All I have to do is put a little drop of this stuff inside each circle, just a tiny little drop to fill the entire circle, and then set it aside to dry, and it will give you a great look as if there's a lens over the gauge. It works fantastic. Really great trick. You can also use clear coat for this, but this has got a really great applicator for it and really works great. I like it, so I use it. Okay, like I said, fiddly bits. Here I am sticking stupid foot rails on there where the driver sits, and these are just little tiny things. You notice I got the tweezers, I got the sausage fingers, I got a little bit of everything going here. It's a real pain. And while I continue to put the stuff in the driver's area, like the dashboard and all that, take a look at the body. And you can see what I'm talking about, how bowed that is, okay? And when I go to put the top on, this is going to be a problem, and I'll show you how I overcome this. But like I said, this kit, you know, they weren't really cranking out quality kits back in the day, and that's all this is a reproduction of that. So, you know, all the flaws you would have had are still there. And let me tell you, those side pieces are really, really bowed. Okay, so now I don't mind telling you right about now, I am pooing into my pants as I'm getting ready to put the glass in because this makes or breaks this kit, and you can't screw this up. So I'm trimming out the front window, and I'll repeat the same process all the way around. Basically, I'm going to trim it out. You notice I'm wearing a glove so I don't mar it because it's really beautiful with that the acrylic on there. And I'm trimming off all the little nubs. And I'm going to make sure that this is all trimmed and fits perfectly. And in this case, it doesn't, okay? And that's a function of the kit, not anything I'm doing. So I'm going to have to kind of clamp it in place and hope that it doesn't mar my window, which it ended up not. But also notice, instead of using my Tamiya thin cement, I'm going to use my Tamiya thin quick setting cement. Because I want this to dry in here pretty quick, you know, before a problem can arise. And basically, with it in place, I'm just going to touch it to the corners and let the capillary action run it around where it has to go. Instead of putting it on beforehand and risk touching it and fingerprints and all this other stuff, this is the ultimate way to go to put your glass in. Get the glass in, get it held in, and then just touch the glue to it and let it do its job. Now here's the roof, and for some contrast, in addition to it being black, I gave it the best glossy clear coat ever. It is spectacular. It shines like a penny, and it's going to look really amazing up there. But the problem is, those bowed sides are going to make it virtually impossible for me to easily glue this down. So that is going to be an issue, and I'm going to have to deal with it. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have something to hold the sides apart from each other so that they're kind of parallel. So here I'm just going to try a toothpick, and I'm going to try and cut a toothpick down to size and see if this is actually going to even work. Because, you know, if it pushes one side out and, you know, it's all bowed to the left or to the right, that's not going to work. It's got to kind of push the pieces out equally, and look at that. Look how nice that actually did. So I like that so much that I'm going to do it. I'm just going to remanufacture that toothpick because I want it, you know, more consistent on each side. So I'm going to cut the point off of both sides and get it to the right length. and that's going to make it so I can get this top put down. Now, for putting the top down, again, like I said, I used a lot of different glues. I've already used some CA, and I've used some 2 different kinds of Tamiya thin. Here I'm going to use CA again, and I'm going to put a little dab inside each of the connecting point. That toothpick is destined to stay there for the rest of its life. Fortunately, there's a perfect little groove for it to sit in. It's not going to fall out. It's not going to go anywhere. So it's just going to be there for forever and ever. Okay, so CA in all the connecting spots. And then it's just a matter of trying to get this all lined up and get it glued down. So you might want to know why I chose to use crazy glue here instead of modeling cement. Now obviously the thin cements don't work here because too much, not enough open time here. It'll all be dried up and gone before I got anything done. Second of all, I want it to get on and be on as quickly as possible so that I reduce the chance of screwing it up. So I'm really about speed and getting it down there and yet having the open time I need to get everything aligned properly. And so I went with the CA. Okay, we are on the home stretch. We've got the velocity stacks in, the steering wheel's in, we're putting the seat in. Things are coming along really great. The car is looking like a champion. I'm super happy with it. So now I also want to tell you that this is actually just like the fire car that I did. I did the build, and then later I came back and did the vignette. So this is going to get the same treatment. After this build, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a vignette for this to sit in, which should be a lot of fun. And if you'll notice, this kit comes with a skeleton, with a cowboy hat, and a 6-shooter and all that. And I'm not going to show you him because he's going to be part of the vignette. And so he'll appear in the next video that I do for model building when I do the little scene for this. But anyhow, okay, the roof's glued on, the interior, the driver's area is looking really great. Now we're going to glue, I guess, what would be called a finial onto the roof. And here I'm mixing glues. So what I'm doing is I'm actually putting a little dab of CA in the flat spot to help hold this in place quickly. But I'm also using a little bit of modeling cement on the tab that goes through the hole in the roof to get me a little bit more of a bonding thing. And if you want to be rich, here's what you need to do. You need to invent a glue that has the quick binding properties of CA, but also has the ability to melt and meld plastic like modeling glue. If you had something like that, that would be fabulous. Anyhow, so we'll just go through here. We'll pop all these finials on top of the roof, and we're going to almost be done with this project. So other than a little bit of cleanup and a little bit of fine detail work around the vehicle, maybe touching up a bad spot in the paint here or there or what have you, I think we can get ready to call this done, and we can take a look now here at the final product. And there she is, the Boot Hill Express. I think it came out amazing. I am so happy with this, and I can promise you there's no chance I could have pulled this off as a kid. Well, there you have it, the Boot Hill Express, and I have to say, I'm super thrilled to death with how this one came out. Yeah, it's as challenging as I ever remember it being. It was not an easy model, and you got to remember these re-releases, they haven't really changed any parts of it, and so they're not really very good, okay? If you want it to come out well, you're really going to have to throw some skill at it. You're going to have to step up your game, and frankly, I almost chucked this a couple times because it was a little infuriating at some points. But at the end of the day, it came out fantastic. I love it, and it sure takes me back home. I can almost picture myself building that using that crappy Testors non-toxic glue. May have been crappy, but I love the smell of that stuff. Anyhow, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, and make sure you click the little bell and you'll be notified anytime I release a new video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'm going to put links to anything that you might need down there, and I will read your questions and comments, so have at it. I love to hear from you guys. Also, keep your eyes peeled because I'm going to be doing a second part, much like the fire truck build, where we're going to do a little vignette to set this down in. Alright, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions wishing you an amazing day where you don't need to call the Boot Hill Express. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great day. Okay, that was terrible. I'm going to have to edit that out. Alright, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions wishing you an amazing day in which you do not need any kind of a hearse to come and pay you a visit. I hope you have a fantastic, amazing day. Until next time, be good.